Welcome to the Adverse Information Reporting Learn at Lunch webinar, the first in a monthly series of industrial security continuing education webinars. I am Christine Beauregard, and I will be your host and presenter for today. Linda Adams will be our producer, working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly for us. We'll give you a brief introduction just so you know a little bit about us before we get started. As I said, I am Christine Beauregard, and I might know a lot of you out there since I've been here at CDSE for almost 15 long years. And now I've been promoted to this webinar series. I am the Industrial Security Curriculum Manager for our external customers, which includes all of you who are FSOs and any of you from government who have industrial security responsibilities. I've held this position for about 2.5 years, and I was an instructor here before that for about 12 years. I also have some time as a DSS industrial security rep, about 9 years in the field, having oversight of our cleared contractors, and another 4 or so years at our headquarters. Linda Adams is our producer, and she is an instructional system designer here at CDSE who brings a lot of good design and presentation experience along with her. So we'll be working together to make sure this runs as smoothly as we Before we get started, let's take a minute to go over some of the administrative items you'll need to know as we work through our way through this webinar. The first thing I want you to know about is the different types of questions you may be asked today. There are actually 2 types. One is a raise your hand type question, and when I ask that question, you just select the little man icon with his hand raised on your lower left-hand corner of your screen to raise your hand, and then once again to lower it. We'll be asking several different poll or multiple choice type questions this morning as well, and I guess we'll have about 4 of those as we go through today as well. The only way that you'll be able to ask us questions is through the use of the chat box to the right of your screen. We've muted all of your telephones, so you can hear us, or hopefully you can hear us, but we can't hear you. So you won't be able to talk to us. So if you have any question at any time during the presentation, write it down in the chat box, send it to us. Linda will be collecting those, and then we have time at the end of our webinar today to provide those questions and answers to you. And we'll also be posting those on our web page for you. We also gave you the link in your email that you received from us yesterday to download our workbook, or the webinar workbook. This workbook was designed to keep you focused and help you follow along with today's presentation. And once you have it completed, it'll be a nice little reference for you to use later on when it comes to any adverse information questions you might think of at another time. We'll also be asking for feedback at the very end of this so that we can continue to make improvements and make this the best learning experience that we can for you. All right, let's get started by taking a look at the NISPOM requirements. There are actually 2 NISPOM requirements that come into play when it comes to your reporting responsibilities and your adverse information reporting responsibilities. The first one that you see on your screen is NISPOM paragraph 1-300, which is your general reporting requirements. And in this paragraph, it basically tells you that you're required to report events that impact the status of the facility clearance, impact the status of an employee's personnel security clearance, affect the proper safeguarding of classified information, or indicate classified information has been lost or stolen. Out of those categories, which do you believe adverse information falls into? And the correct answer is impacts the status of an employee's personnel clearance. Additionally, NISPOM paragraph 1-300 requires you to establish procedures so that your cleared employees know their responsibility for reporting pertinent information. What this means to you is that not only is it important that you know what your requirements are and what to report, it's equally as important for your cleared employees to know that same information. We'll continue with the NISPOM in NISPOM paragraph 1-302A. And this one is the one that specifically addresses your adverse information reporting requirements. And as you see, it pretty much tells you you're required to report adverse information that comes to your attention concerning any of your cleared employees. It also states that reports based on rumor or innuendo should not be made, and that you are still required to submit an adverse information report even if the employee terminates employment. So what this tells you is, don't report anything based on rumor or innuendo. It has to be based on fact. And if you have employees who leave your company who were cleared and you become aware of adverse information about them, you still have the responsibility to report. So now that you know what the NISPOM requires, let's take a look at what you should be reporting. The NISPOM defines adverse information as any information that negatively reflects on the integrity or character of a cleared employee, information that suggests that one's ability to safeguard classified information may be impaired, or indicates one's access to classified information clearly may not be in the best interest of national security. Now this NISPOM definition kind of gives you a broad idea of what adverse information is, but let's see if we can break it down a little better for you with our next slide. So when it comes to what to report, I want you to think about the term adverse information and what it means to you. If I went around today and asked each of you to tell me what was meant by the term adverse information, I would probably get a different response from each and every one of you. But throughout each of these different responses, I would probably see a common theme, and that common theme would be drugs and alcohol, which is correct, but I want you to remember that adverse information is much more than just drugs and alcohol. Take a look at the categories of information on your slide. I'll give you a minute to look at those. Does it look familiar? It should, because these categories are what we find in the DoD adjudicative guidelines for determining eligibility for access to classified information. These are the same categories of information that are reviewed when making those initial eligibility determinations for each of your cleared employees. Some examples of adverse information includes culpability for security violations, use of illegal drugs, excessive use of alcohol, wage garnishments, repeated instances of failing to follow established procedures, unauthorized use of classified computers. Those are just a partial list of the type of information that might be reported, and as you can see, each of those examples that I gave you can fit into one of the 13 categories that were on your slide, and you also have that list in your handbook. Remember, it's not only the information that needs to be reported that you must be aware of. You need to make sure that your cleared employees are equally as informed and knowledgeable of what types of information need to be reported. So now that you know what we mean by adverse information, let's take a look at where and how we're going to submit our reports. Where do you think your adverse information report should be sent? The correct answer is DISCO. DISCO, if you remember, they make decisions on eligibility for our cleared employees in industry. Since these reports affect the status of an employee's personnel security clearance, these reports go to DISCO. Pretty simple. My next question is, how are you going to send these reports? And the correct answer here, although you may have many different answers you might want to give me here, the answer I'm looking for is JPAS. And the reason I say JPAS is that there's an industrial security letter, ISL 2011-04, that addresses adverse information. And in this ISL, it states that adverse information reports should be submitted as incident reports in JPAS. And that's the reason I'm looking for JPAS, is the answer to my question, how are you going to send your report? Now that you're clear on what to report, where and how to submit your reports, let's see how often you should be making these reports. Just think to yourself how many reports you've made in the past year. Have you made more than 10? 5 to 9? Less than 5? 1 maybe? Or perhaps none? Any of those might be correct answers, and it all depends on your classified involvement and the cleared employees you have at your company. But no matter how many reports you may submit, the one thing I want you to ask yourself are you sure you're really submitting all the adverse information reports that need to be submitted? If you've only submitted 5 reports, are you sure that's all that needed to be reported at your company? My guess would be that you're only aware of a fraction of the reports that should actually be made. The reason I say that is this is a really tough requirement for most of your cleared employees. If you think about it, from the time we're able to talk, the one common thread of information we always hear, whether from our parents or from our teachers, is mind your own business. Don't be a tattletale. Don't be a snitch. But when it comes to national security, there is no such thing as a tattletale. It is a responsibility and a requirement for your cleared employees to report adverse information that they become aware of on any of your cleared employees. And if you're worried about making these reports, remember there are 2 court cases in the NISPOM, and they fall in the notes section under paragraph 1-302A, Becker versus Philco and Taglio versus Philco. Both of those court cases were decided in February of 1967, and in a nutshell, those court cases determine that you are not held liable for defamation of an employee because of the reports you make to the government under the requirements of this or any previous manual. So it protects you from making these reports and supports you in making the reports at your company. So in order for your procedures to be effective, you're going to have to make a sort of cultural change at your company, from a culture of not reporting to a culture of reporting. Let me give you an example that might help this make a little bit more sense to you. Have you ever been driving in a car? You're going down a major road or highway, you look at your speedometer, and you notice you're going 10, 15, maybe even 20 miles over the speed limit? I have too, on more than one occasion, I'm sad to admit. But imagine, have you ever looked at your speedometer, and once you saw how fast you were going, did you ever immediately pull over to the side of the road, jump out of your car, flag down the first police officer who came by and demanded to be arrested for speeding? None of us have. And the police officer would probably think we're crazy if we did that. But if you think about it, that's just what we're asking you to do with your employees. We're asking your employees to tell on themselves, to tell on their co-workers, some who may be their friends, maybe even their neighbors, and the people they have to work with or besides day after day. This is not an easy requirement to break through. The cultural change you have to make happen at your company is to make sure your employees understand that this responsibility is not optional. And as a cleared employee, they are required to report adverse information no matter how uncomfortable or difficult it may be. So now you may be asking yourself, how am I going to make this cultural change? I'm going to break it down into 2 easy steps. And the 2 steps that you want to make sure you have incorporated into your procedures is the first one is to provide training. The first thing that comes out of your employee's mouth when they don't know something or they give you a wrong answer about what adverse information is nobody ever told me that, or I didn't know that. Don't let that be used as an excuse at your company. And the way that you can make sure that doesn't happen is to provide adverse information training in both your initial and refresher briefings at your company. Make sure your employees know what it is they have to report. And then don't assume that just because you told them or you included it in your training that they're going to remember it or they know it. You're going to have to stay on them and continually remind them of this responsibility. The second step in making this cultural change is to, once you tell them what they need to know, verify or validate that these procedures are working and that you're getting the reports you want to get. The easiest way to do this is to talk to your employees or interview your employees as part of your continual evaluation of your security program or as part of your self-inspection. Let them tell you what they do or do not know. And when they don't know what they should, take the time right then and there to educate them. Set them straight so they do know what their responsibilities are. And remember, it's not the reports you know about, it's those that you don't know about that causes concern. And for those reports you don't know about, they can have a definite impact on our national security and on your company. Those reports that you don't know about could lead to loss or compromise of classified information, which could potentially lead to damage to our national security and the potential loss of life of our service members. There could be a definite economic impact to your company, a loss of revenue or profits that could lead to job loss or layoffs at your company. So the impacts can be severe, and that is one of the reasons these reports are so important. And remember, these reports are part of that continuous evaluation of our cleared employees to remain eligible to access classified information. History has shown, at least our recent history, that most of the espionage cases or spy cases in the last 10 or so years have all been our trusted insider, someone who we cleared and gave access to our classified information. Perhaps there was adverse information that, if reported, could have nipped that bud, could have nipped it in the bud and cut off any potential damage that happened way after the fact. So it's important that these reports are made. It's important that your employees know what they need to report. We want to also give you this morning some helpful hints, things that I've learned from talking to FSOs and IS reps from across the country, lessons learned perhaps, or tips that will help you to have a better adverse information reporting at your company. So the first one we'll go over is stay connected to your human resource department. Your HR department has access to a lot of information that can impact your adverse information reporting. Make sure your HR department knows that you have a need for that information and keeps you in the loop for things like wage garnishments, disciplinary actions, personnel actions against any of your cleared employees that would require adverse information reports to be submitted. You need to start building a relationship and then maintaining that relationship with your HR department to make sure that you don't have a breakdown in communication. Our second helpful hint is to submit a report whenever you identify a culpable employee. Whenever a security violation is committed at your company and you determine the responsible person, the next thing you should do is to see if they meet the culpability requirements of NISPOM paragraph 1304. NISPOM paragraph 1304 says if that violation was a deliberate disregard of security requirements, if the violation involves gross negligence or a pattern of negligence or carelessness, that individual, that responsible individual for that violation should be reported as a culpable employee via an adverse information report. Even if after you do your investigation you determine there was no compromise based on that violation that occurred, an adverse information would still be reported as long as that responsible individual met the requirements of NISPOM 1-304. Our third helpful hint is know what is meant by the term cleared employees. According to the NISPOM, there's a NISPOM definition for cleared employees, and it says our cleared employees includes all contractor employees granted personnel security clearances and all employees being processed for a personnel security clearance. And also remember, NISPOM 1302A says that you have to submit reports on employees who have terminated or left your company should you become aware of adverse. Our fourth helpful hint is that if your company is involved in SCI programs, send your report to both your SCI customer and DISCO. Sending this report to your SCI customer alone does not fulfill your NISPOM requirement. The NISPOM states that your reports should be sent to your CSA or DISCO in this case. So the report needs to go to both the SCI customer and DISCO in order for you to be compliant with the NISPOM. Helpful hint number 5, for criminal conduct, don't wait until the case goes to court or sentencing occurs before reporting. Report as soon as you become aware of the adverse information. There are a lot of FSOs who want to hold on to that information until it either goes to court or sentencing occurs, which could be months or years later. Don't do that. Don't get in the habit of doing that. As soon as you become aware of that criminal conduct, submit the report. And our last helpful hint is when in doubt, send the adverse information report out. always err on the side of caution. If you're not sure, if you can't fit it nicely into one of those 13 categories, send the report in and put the onus on the government to make the adjudicative decision. Don't get yourself into the habit of playing judge and jury. And if you submit a report and it doesn't turn out to be anything, DISCO's not going to do anything with it. They're going to close the case and there'll be no harm, no foul. Now that you know everything you need to know about adverse information reports, let's give you a little review to see what you learned today. In your workbook on page 6, you're going to see this review activity, and I'd like you to circle all of the correct answers. I'll give you a second or two to do that. And our correct answers are, the first correct answer is, I guess I should say, send your report to your CSA DISCO via JPass. Our second correct statement is foreign influence, criminal conduct, financial considerations, emotional disorders, and alcohol consumption are all types of behaviors that should be reported. And the third correct statement in your workbook is submit a report whenever you identify a culpable employee. Your feedback is important to us, and that I encourage you to go to our mailbox, our industrial security mailbox that you see in the slide. It's also in your workbook, and provide any comments or suggestions that you might have for this or any future webinar topics. We're trying to make this the best product that we can. We're committed to excellence here at CDSE, and we can't do that without your input. We have some time set aside for our question and answers, and I have a few here that I'd like to go over with you. So our first question that we have today is, I know you said that adverse information reports should be submitted as incident reports in JPass, but can't we fax or email them too? The answer to that question is yes. You can fax, you can email, you could even mail them into DISCO. However, the preferred method is through JPass. And remember, the ISL suggests that you submit it as an incident report in JPass. If you fax, mail, or email them into DISCO, DISCO is going to have to get their adjudicators to scan them in their database, and then they're going to have to manually enter them in JPass, which takes time that could be used reviewing equips or adjudicating cases, and adding time to the time it takes to grant clearances. So the most efficient way to submit your reports is through JPass. The second question is, does adverse information reports need to be submitted for an employee who has eligibility but who is not currently accessing classified information? So I guess we would have an employee that has eligibility in JPass but is currently not working on a classified contract. If you have anyone like that in your company, the answer is yes, you would still want to submit an adverse information report on that person. Think of the intent of the requirement. It's part of that continuous evaluation of continued eligibility for access to classified information. And since they are eligible for access, you would want to submit the report. And even if this person would terminate employment, remember 1-302A says you are still required to submit reports for those who have terminated. So our quick answer to that is yes. Someone has eligibility but not having access at the current time, you become aware of adverse information, submit the report. Our third question is, should I notify the employee that an adverse information report has been submitted? Well, this is kind of a double-edged sword here. I would say that since the employee has the responsibility to report on themselves, hopefully they already know a report is required or are the person making the report to you. If they didn't, we might have another issue we have to deal with there. However, let's say you receive the information from another cleared employee and will be submitting the adverse information report. I always believe that being upfront is the best practice, and I would recommend that you let them know that you're going to be submitting the report based on the information you are aware of. And if you submit the report and an investigation is open, they're going to find out anyway, so it's much better to be upfront. You have to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to security. And our last question here is, how many adverse information reports should I be making each year? We had a question earlier to think about how many you've made in the past year. And you know, it would be really nice if I could give you a concrete number of reports that for your company you need 15 reports a year. I can't do that because the number of reports that you submit is going to depend on a number of factors, and it'll be different for each and every company. What you need to do is to establish an effective reporting procedure to ensure that your cleared employees know their responsibilities, and then that you get the appropriate information to make those reports. These question and answers will be posted on our website, so in a few days you may want to go back and review them if you aren't clear or need to see these again. And that about does it for us today. I would like to congratulate you on officially being the first group to complete this webinar. I hope you enjoyed today's session, but more importantly, I hope you learned a little something about adverse information that you didn't know when we started. Remember how important these reports are. They're just not another requirement that you have to meet in order to pass your inspection. These really do make a difference. Don't be content with just submitting reports and thinking, well, I've submitted reports, we must be doing what we need to do. Make sure your employees understand what it is you want them to report and are fully aware of their reporting responsibilities. On the last page of your workbook, you have links to much of the information we talked about here today, to include the link for the court cases I mentioned earlier. We have a link for our NISP reporting requirements course. If you have would like more information about adverse information reporting or any of the other NISPOM reporting requirements, that's a good reference for you. We have a link to the ISL 2011-04, and all of those ISLs are also found on the DSS website. And we also have our CDSE webinar website, where we're going to post our question and answers and a copy of the recording from today's presentation. It's a good idea to get in the habit to check our website for future webinar dates and topics. Again, I'd like to thank you all for taking time spending with us this morning. I hope you never miss an opportunity to learn at lunch. Have a great afternoon, and thanks again for spending your time with us. Until next month, goodbye.